that logo is called The Meaning of Music, and it's actually a sculpture that I made in 1985. I'm pleased today to have the opportunity to speak with people, John Vervaeke, Bishop Barron, and Jonathan Pageau. I'm going to ask you what you think meaning means. Implicit idea, I suppose, that meaning has different depths, and that religious meaning is among the deepest of depths, and like a lotus flower that sort of comes up from the darkest depths, up through the dark water, and then blooms on the surface of the water in the sun. I'd like you to riff on that. We'll go from man to man to do that.
Talking about meaning in this context, we're using meaning as a metaphor, is we're doing it all right now, and we're doing it like this. I'm standing out, I'm salient. There's an element of arousal, there's affectively laden connectedness. This is what's known as embodied cognition. This is a dynamical self-organizing process, and you can feel it, and you're evolving in this dynamically coupled fashion, a salient landscape that makes you feel that you're here now in this particular state of consciousness, in this situational awareness. So you're deeply fundamentally connected. Central cognitive agency. If you don't have that, you're not a cognitive agent. And this dynamical, embodied, evolving connectedness, a core feature and dimension of our whole agency. To bind together, we're looking through it, and by means of it, it affords our agency. Celebrate it. Opposite of what happens in addiction. My agency is opening up. The world is opening up. Inexhaustible fount of emerging intelligibility. That's the experience of sacredness. Deepest mutual resonance between ourselves and the depths of reality. I hope that was helpful.
I was listening to the Jupiter Symphony. When you look at the world, there's a central point of focus. It's a very small area that becomes very clear. And the nothingness you don't even perceive. It's just not there. And that's that's very much like what consciousness is. And you focus your fovea on what's most meaningful. So that's sort of like a metaphor for consciousness and meaning. And then my goal is to have an interesting conversation. That story that's guiding me is nested in a larger story, which outside of that is another story. And then outside of that, there's another presumption, which is, well, why would I bother trying to make the world a better place? And that's where you start to shade into the religious. It's like, who exactly am I imitating when I enact that morality? Implicit figure at the outer edge of the narrative structuring of my consciousness and meaning realization, and the nothingness you don't even perceive. It's just not there. This is independent of religious belief as far as I'm concerned. Christ is the symbolic realization of our culture's determination of the embodiment of the ideal. And it's an image, and it grips us. It's the thing we imitate or we fight against. We're in that whether we like it or not. And then, and I suppose that was an experience of God, if you want to put it that way. And that's where this starts to shade into the religious per se. So that's it for me. So Bishop, do you want to take it from there?
Virtually. Good to be with all of you. Canadian Jesuit. I guess I would say meaning is to be in a purposive relationship to a value. The true, the good, and the beautiful, right? The three transcendental properties of being. The mind is like a bird that flies and it perches for a time, it looks, and then it flies again. And a meaningful life is one that's lived in a purposive relationship to values. It's seeking them. A life lived in purposive relationship to the source of goodness, truth, and beauty, which is God. We experience things in the world as more or less true, good, and beautiful. And we also notice them ordered hierarchically. That's truer, that's better, that's more beautiful. The properties of being, the good, the true, and the beautiful. And being is by its very nature unlimited. See those hierarchies only finally in relationship to some unconditioned form of goodness, truth, and beauty. That's religious meaning, it seems to me, is to be in purposive relationship to that. And so I can't go on indefinitely. That would make my act of the will incoherent. Be in relationship to this most alluring horizon of all desire. And so finally, I want not just this particular good, I want goodness itself. That's a religious relationship.
Jonathan?
The reason why we perceive hierarchy is because we're always judging or perceiving or trying to evaluate whether something is good. This desire makes you see the pattern of the apple because you have to engage with it. You have to relate to it. You have to eat it. But this pattern, let's say, of binding, it stacks up. But it also does something else, is that it stacks up people together. It binds us together as well. That can also kind of help you understand religious practice. Every act of recognition of a good is going to be a mini celebration, but that stacks up together in terms of people gathering and singing and in order to celebrate the highest good.
Let me just, that's dopaminergically mediated. There's a fundamental neuroscientific reality underneath the idea that to perceive something good in relationship to a higher good is a celebration. And I mean that directly, like meaning is derived from this nested hierarchy. And then I felt that whatever had descended, it seemed that as if it was sorrowful and it departed from me slowly. And
so in the same way that the world reveals itself to us as this hierarchy of the good, it also reveals itself to us cosmically. That's why there are temples. That's why there's the law of Moses that was received on the top of the mountain, that there is a cosmic revelation of the same pattern that you encounter as an individual. And so that is what ends up creating these revelations of being into the world and binding us together as a body instead of just these disparate individuals. Of these revelations, which is the one that binds the most reality together into itself? And I think that it's like Christ doesn't just go down into the underworld and resurrect. When he comes back up, the underworld is empty and death is defeated, and that's the end. The fact that we recognize it, that we've brought it together, that we've celebrated it, means that it is part of this kind of cosmic revelation. We've discounted it completely, but I think we're at a point now with this meaning crisis where we can go back and reevaluate it and understand it as the possibility of these relevance realization patterns stacking up beyond the individual, let's say.